Good evening.
Hello.
Hello. I'm Helen, and this is my second home. So I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the Moseley Society to the Dovecote. And if you know the area at all, you might know that behind the trees is Moseley Hall Hospital. And before it was a hospital, it was good old Moseley Hall. And so these buildings are relics from the time when it was a manor house.
Hello, my name's John and I'm going to be hosting this evening with Andy. What a fantastic evening to be out tonight in a very Moseley experience here in the Dovecote. On Monday, Andy and I were sat in his garden talking about tonight, and Andy asked, how would I introduce myself? I was like, I don't know, I don't have a professional way of introducing myself. The best thing I think that sums me up is a professional geek, really. No, I'm a proud geek. I used to hide it in my 20s, but I'm out and proud as a geek now. Because at least once a month, I'm somewhere in the country hosting a similar event in some hotel or somewhere, or conference centre, but they're usually sci-fi and cult television affairs. Yay, indeed. So, although Andy's not the first author I've spoken to, I'm normally sat here with a Time Lord or a Starfleet officer. But of course today, we're not here to talk about Daleks or Klingons. We're here to talk about the latest instalment of the ongoing Touchstone series. I just want to say that last summer, I became obsessed with the first series. And it all started because of Lorna, who I work with on a Friday. And I was saying that I love wandering around Birmingham, just rambling around, urban rambling, and imagining what the city would have been like at different periods in history. And of course Lorna said, funnily enough, Andy has written a series of books based on that very idea.
So it's this character, Catherine Bright, who's come to Birmingham with Buffalo Bill's Wild West show in 1887. She's trying to find her lost past, which is in Birmingham, and she's trying to find her way to here. Word had flown around the city. Buffalo Bill and his Indians were in the council house. Everyone had thronged to see them. Buffalo Bill paused at the top of the steps as if on a stage overlooking the waiting carriages. He waved to the crowd, many of them cheered. But Catherine heard the unmistakable roar of anger that swelled from the rear of the mob. Her eyes swept the terrain, and she spotted them, a group of 100 or more angry white men in cloth caps, slicing through the crowd like blue shirts charging through long grass. Catherine turned, looking for Chief Redshirt. He stood at the top of the stone steps, his eyes sweeping the crowd, impassive, imperious. A swell of anger rose again from the mob. A stone arced through the air and missed him, clattering into the grand hall of the council house. Redshirt stood still, gazing, unafraid. They entered the camp and departed to their separate berths. Buffalo Bill to his marquee tent with its buffalo head crest above the entrance, the whites to their caravans, the Indians to their teepees. "Wait, Catherine!" It was the reporter, Peter Weathers. She hadn't noticed him return with them. Catherine, he'd said, her white name. How strange it sounded on his lips. How could her own name sound so foreign to her? "Can we talk some more?" he asked. She lit a lamp and quickly had a fire blazing, golden light bathing their faces as their eyes sought each other. She indicated a rug where he might sit, snatched up a stick of firewood and scratched a shape into the dirt. A short tower, octagonal, a wooden staircase to its side, bricked up arches where windows should be. "This," she said. "What is this?" He shrugged, puzzled. "I don't know, what is it?" "A tower, somewhere here in this city. You know it?" He leaned closer and examined it, stroking his chin. I'm not sure." "You can find it, you can show it to me." "How do you know it's here?" She looked away. "I saw it, in a dream." "Are you sure it's real? Are you sure it's here?" She nodded. "I know it." When she looked at him again, he had a curious expression, as if he knew more than he said, as if he were trying to read her mind. Could he read it in her heart that she no longer belonged with these people in this sham of a show? Could he hear this city calling to her? Could he see that she wanted to shed these native clothes and escape? She squirmed and felt suddenly self-conscious under his gaze. "I can look for you," he said. "I could help you find it. But I want something too." She sought his eyes again and tried to read his intent, aware of her knife lying over to her right, next to the bundle of kindling. "What do you want?" she asked. "Isn't it obvious?" he said. "Your story." He pulled out a notebook and pencil, licking the tip. "Tell me your story and I'll find you your tower. Is that a deal?" She pretended to mull it over, though she had no choice to make. He was the only person she knew in the whole city who might help her. Okay.
I was actually going to ask you the significance of the location we're at initially, but you've already touched on that in a way in that chapter, haven't you? Without giving too much away for people that haven't read them yet, is there anything else you can add to the...
Yeah, it's a time travel series, and but I kind of, what I was really fascinated by was this notion of time slips and slipping into the past, and this character Catherine, the place that gives her power and from which she can kind of transport herself back into the past is this. And I've never established how that happened. That's a kind of origin story that is going to be released sometime. But it's featured in several of the Touchstone books. So it's featured in the first season 2 or 3 times, very important scenes. And obviously it's in this book as well. And this chase across the city, so Catherine's getting away from Buffalo Bill's Wild West show and trying to get it to this place, but she has to make her way across the city, and the police are looking for her. There's a Pinkerton agent looking for her, and the Peaky Blinders are looking for her as well. So I've put them in it, and because there's a price on her head. But it's all leading towards a big finale, which is inside this Dovecote.
I like the way that you've chosen to link these together as a series or as seasons, which is much more something we associate with television and clock sets.
Thing, yeah.
So why go down that route, the series of novels?
Because it was originally conceived as a TV series. So I had this time travel idea, and I conceived it as a series. It was in episodes, and it would be in 6 parts. And I even talked to various producers. So I wrote the first 2 episodes, scripts, and talked to various producers about getting it off the ground as a TV series. But the problem was, what I'd done was devise the most expensive TV series in history, and that is, it's time travel and it's a different period every episode, so we had to change it every episode. And period drama's expensive enough, but when you have to change it as well, it's just crazy. So it never really got off the ground. And then I just thought, well, why don't I novelise it and turn it into a series of novels?
So in the first novel, it's obviously very Moseley focused, starting at St Mary's Church, into Borstal Heath, and then as the series progressed, out into King's Heath and across Birmingham. Yeah. And in the second series, you've moved to America. What prompted that leap across the ocean? I wanted to just kind of mythologise where I live, Moseley, and just create a mythology around it. And then when I moved to King's Heath, so did the series. What I'm doing is putting into it everything I'm interested in. So I've always been interested in Native American culture and history, and there was a kind of throwaway scene at the end of the first season of Touchstone where this character Catherine, that's where she ends up. Right at the end is waking up in this field, and she sits up, and there's this Native American charging towards her with a tomahawk, and we're thinking, wow, she's gone somewhere strange. And that was going to be it.
And then I learned about Buffalo Bill's Wild West show coming to Birmingham 3 times. And the photograph that's in the brochure you have is the 3rd time he came to Birmingham, and all the performers rode down New Street. And that photograph is just incredible. And I saw that photograph and thought, wow, that's the corner of New Street and Corporation Street. And it's the culture clash of these Native Americans riding down the street and all these Peaky Blinders just staring up at them from the street corner. And that was the real inspiration for this. I thought, yeah, I can write that. That's just really kind of magical and incredible. So it was that photo that inspired it. Although that photo is inaccurate because it's not the 1887 trip, it's 1906, I think. So it's kind of much later, but I've just kind of cheated it because I can do that. It's a fantasy. So.
The research element is clearly very important to you. How meticulous are you about the historic facts within the fiction of the story?
I like to think very, but I will twist it if I need to for the story. So if you're a historian and you're really a stickler for historical facts, you might read my books and think, well, that's clearly inaccurate and that clearly never happened. But at a certain point, I think I can. There's a story needs to happen, so I'll kind of bend it, as with that photograph. So I've written a short story around that photograph, which is kind of the prequel to this book. It's just a nice little story. But I know that story didn't happen at that time, but I don't care, so I'm just going to write it. So yeah, a lot of research goes into all of the books. And in fact, this series, David Wake, and he's acts as editor on my books. So he's the person who's unlucky enough to be the first to read them. And on the previous book, he kept coming back at me saying, you're just putting in your research, pages and pages of your research, because it's interesting stuff you found out, but it's not progressing the story, and the story is stopping, so cut it out. I'm like, no, but it's so fascinating, these facts are so good. But he's right, if they're not progressing the story, then you've got to rip them out, really. So there's that kind of tension all the time between really cool, interesting stuff I find out, and actually, is it relevant to the story?
So you obviously not only are you researching the events that are going on, but specific places. You're quite meticulous about making sure that that's factual as well, and some of the minor characters and people in the stories.
Yeah. So when I know when it's set, I go down to the library and I take out all the Kelly's directories, which are there for about 100 years. And then go through and find out, okay, what are the shops along Moseley High Street now, and or around whatever scene I'm setting, what was there, and how much has it changed? So you put all those things in, and now more and more what I'm doing is putting in historical figures from the past. There wasn't much of it in the first season, but so Arthur Conan Doyle appeared in Buried in Time. And obviously with the first of these books, Bright Star Falling, it's set entirely in America, and it's the Native American Wars. So Sitting Bull's in it, General Custer's in it, Crazy Horse, all these historical figures. And now Buffalo Bill, and Annie Oakley's in this as well. And I get to, if you read the book, I get to write the line, Annie got her gun. Just my little joke, but that's the only reason she's in there for as well. So,
how do you decide on the periods that the story visits?
It's what I'm interested in. So, yeah, I was interested in the Blitz, so I did the Blitz. I was interested in the 1930s dance music scene, so I was definitely going to do that. 1980. It was all leading towards 1980 in the first season, because that was my youth, and it's the 1980 new romantic scene and the club scene in Birmingham, and being in a band at that time. So I thought, I'm really, really doing that, and I don't care if no one likes it, and that's just my world. So yeah, and I'm interested in Native American history, so I'm going to do that. So it's definitely just something whatever I'm interested in, I'll do.
Do you have a set of rules for the Touchstone universe in terms of, because it's obviously there's magical elements in it, because it's time travel.
Yeah.
You can't just get in a police box and zoom off.
No.
So how do you decide? Do you have a set of rules like some, I don't know, sci-fi writers do? Here's what can happen in the universe and here's what can't.
No, because I'm making it up as I go along.
Yeah. But it's evolved over the time, because the first one is very much, it's clearly genre, it's like young adult time travel. But as you like, Buried in Time is a Jack the Ripper one, right?
Yeah.
That's like literary fiction, I think, sort of, for a lot of it. So you're evolving.
Yeah. And I think if I'd had rules, it wouldn't have evolved in that way.
Yeah.
So I can be adventurous and take it into different places, I think.
Last summer, when I was totally immersed in reading the first series, I did actually come up to Moseley, something I've done many, many times before, into the heart of the village, but with my Touchstone eyes on. And I went actually to look at all the different locations you'd mentioned, and it opened my eyes and showed me different details and took me down different alleyways really, and see where people lived in the stories. But there was one disappointment.
Yeah.
I went to St Mary's Church, and there was something that wasn't there.
Yeah.
What's missing?
The grave, that's the entire... Absolutely. Doesn't exist. And at the end of the season, I have this scene where it finally comes back through and there's no grave there. To kind of, give a nod to that. But it was inspired by, there's a gravestone in Pigeon Park in town. And that's kind of what I had in mind. It kind of looks like a baby's cot, so it's quite low, with almost a headboard on it, sort of. And I've always kind of seen it. I thought that's a fascinating thing. So I was always thinking of that. And even thought, are they going to travel from Moseley into the city centre every time they have to travel back into the past? And I thought, no, because just the act of writing that every time is just awkward. It's got to be local. So, and then you ditch that idea altogether, and they just are in the past.
Okay. Any more questions?
Do you think audiences have evolved as well? Because something like Outlander, you're a fan of that, but that's basically a time travel romance, isn't it?
Yeah.
But as it goes on, it gets incredibly dark and grisly.
It's really dark.
Oh yeah. So I think over time they're expecting a lot more from you. Is that fair? The audience.
Yeah.
They're expecting you to experiment.
Because it started off as this kind of teenage time travel thing, and then became a bit darker. What was clear to me was that actually it wasn't teenagers buying the book; it was older people, because they're interested in history. So my audience was actually quite a lot older than I thought it was, even though it still charts in teenage fiction as well. And it's gone dark, but it's not gone incredibly. There's been no sex scenes in it. There's no swearing in it either. So I've kind of kept it cleanish, even though one whole book is Jack the Ripper mutilating prostitutes. It's not that clean, but it is to a certain extent. But I push it as into as dark an area as I can.
Sure.
Yeah. I just want to say thank you very much for organising this event this evening. Thanks for asking me to participate. I've loved it, and I've done a lot of these interviews over the years, but never in such a lovely location. And finally, thank you for making me feel at home by wearing Sylvester McCoy's hat.
Hey! Time no reference.